Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. Tonight we have author Mary Keliikoa. She has a brand new book out today. Very
Yeah.
exciting. Called Deadly Tides. It is the sequel to Hidden Pieces, which I believe I'm going to say Misty Pines. Did I get that right?
You did.
Series. Oh, good. um, so we wanted to get her back and just chat about the new installment in the series and what she's up to, and we'll find some different things to talk about. I hope that we didn't talk about last time. I need to start writing stuff down because I keep thinking, oh, did I already ask her that? We're going to get 3 or 4 books in, and I'm surely going to have asked you everything already.
That's all right.
To start out with, can you talk a little bit about the series overall, the main character and the setting, and maybe a little bit about book one to kind of set up our conversation about the second book?
Yeah, sure. So it's set down at the Oregon coast. Misty Pines is fictional, but it is definitely based upon an area in which I grew up, which is around the Warrington, Astoria, all the way up through Seaside area. That is kind of Misty Pines. And I had always been intrigued and felt like that whole area was so atmospheric. And I had the idea of a series and doing a series in that area for several years. And I just didn't have a story yet. I didn't have a character yet. I just had a location. So that came a little bit later. And then Sheriff Jax Turner kind of appeared to me one day once I kind of knew the case that I wanted him to be working on. And he really is a compilation of a lot of the men in my life that I grew up with, military men, law enforcement, strong, stoic men, but yet a heart of gold. And so I really wanted to create this series around that. In the very first book, Hidden Pieces, it's actually based on a true crime. I think we talked about this last time, that it was based on a crime that happened in my hometown of Sherwood when a young girl was out walking and had been abducted. She was out with her friend. But in Hidden Pieces, it's 2 sisters out walking. And that becomes the cold case of Hidden Pieces. And it runs parallel and weaves in and out with a current missing 14-year-old girl. And so Jax has a chance at redemption, at getting it right, and because he was part of that old case prior. So so that's Hidden Pieces. And then we fast forward into Deadly Tides, which is the next installment. And obviously he got through the first book. He got some redemption, and so now we're here with Deadly Tides, book 2.
Can you tell a little bit about book 2, like the setup for it, maybe what would appear on the flat copy, so it's not give too much away?
Yeah. So basically he's called in for a welfare check. Life has kind of returned to a certain normal. When we leave him in Hidden Pieces, he has an ex-wife, Abby, who you meet in book 1, and she plays a much bigger role in book 2. So he's called out for a welfare check and on a missing surf shop owner. And it appears that surf shop owner had hung up with his brother at 8 o'clock the night before, and to check a noise out in the garage. And all of a sudden he didn't come back to return the phone call. And so Jax goes out to check. And let's just say he finds a few things that are shy of okay, and and perhaps he's missing. So yes, so that he does go out and that starts. And then Abby is going to be playing a role in book 2 in Deadly Tides because her mother has Alzheimer's. And you find out right in the very first chapter that mother has gotten out of the care home and she's ended up at the beach, and where she has found a severed foot. And so there will be 2 cases going on with Jax and Abby as they try to figure out what's happened to the surf legend and who that foot belongs to.
It is. So you touched on this a little bit, I think, in your answer, when you were describing the series and stuff, but so your first series, which we'll touch on a little bit later too, so that people can go out and grab that one too if it sounds interesting to them. But your first series is much more centered on the legal world, and it's still mysteries, but it kind of comes out of that perspective. And you've mentioned that it comes out of your experience in the legal field. What was it like to switch from a character that's seeing the world through the lens of the law and legal, the legal aspect, almost kind of like when the beginning of Law and Order, you know, they have the two branches, and you've kind of gone from one to the other. And I'm curious, other than people, excuse me, people that you grew up around, was there any sort of mental shift, research, you know, thought processes and that kind of thing that you had to switch when you're taking a different perspective of a case, because you're now, you know, looking at it from a law enforcement angle rather than a legal angle?
Yeah, because my first series is a PI agent, yes, and she's a little rogue, and here he's going to need to play a little bit more by the rules.
Right.
Yeah, there was a shift. I mean, I think the biggest shift was just actually writing a male character versus a female. That was probably the largest
Oh,
shift,
that's
right?
true. Yeah, yeah.
Just trying to get that particular aspect right, but also just there was a little bit more research, but thankfully I have a really great detective that is a resource for me. So anything I need to have answered as far as procedural side, I can certainly tap that anytime. But really, as far as approach, it's still solving a puzzle.
Yeah.
And so in that way, it wasn't a whole lot different. I would say that in Misty Pines, I dig a little deeper in the psychological suspense side of the characters, not only in the case, the cases are grittier that he comes across, but also his emotional arc is much grittier. He has had a loss of a child, a loss of a marriage. And then the people he's dealing with also have their flaws and their brokenness. So there's a little bit more psychological aspect to that.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
I'm gonna switch a little bit up because I was trying to think what's something that we didn't talk about last time, and I don't mind repeating because, you know, audience people come in, but it's nice to have some different things that we cover too. And I was kind of noodling on the idea of ideas, and how one of the questions that I think authors get asked a lot is, where do your ideas come from? And I mean, we could talk about that a little bit, but I'm also really curious about how different authors take a nugget of an idea and move that into something that's fully fleshed out, and there's a story and there's characters and there's plot and everything. And for you, does it often come out of the fact that you're just kind of thinking and getting, you know, what if this or what if that all the time? Or how does the sort of the idea getting process work for you? And then subsequently, how does it work in your process to take that little nugget and kind of play with it and figure out, is there a whole book here, or is this not a whole book? And
Yeah, because it really comes down to character, right? That's kind of how I approach it first a little bit these days is, you know, the character is going to be my main central character. And I'm starting to really dive more into the character story and how they might approach a crime. But, you know, really, I think I'm a pantser. So
yeah,
it's really hard to sit and say, well, I really plan all this out because
yeah.
My brain works best when my fingers are moving on the keyboard. And so I may have a story idea. And then I just start for the first chapter and then move into the second chapter and just start to see if it gets some momentum. I've gotten recently to like page 50 on a couple of ideas, and I've stopped. And I kind of notice when I stop, I'm like, maybe it's not quite panning out, because for me, I always want to go someplace that's not what people will expect. And so as I'm kind of writing, I'm like, can I go there? Can I get there? Is it believable? I mean, you can do all sorts of crazy things, right?
Yeah.
But will the reader buy it, you know, at the end, you know? So can I make this believable by doing this or that? And if I
Well, I
can't,
think that's the challenge, right? Because I mean, I think as readers, we all are willing to suspend our disbelief to some extent.
Right.
Like, I'm a fantasy reader a lot of the time, so I'm really willing to suspend my disbelief. But
Right.
it has to, there's like some level of story logic that has to work. And and it's amazing to me how little a thing can be that will throw you out of that story logic.
Right.
And then subsequently, then how much respect I have for writers who manage to get through a whole book without throwing me out of it, because it doesn't really take a whole lot, like a slip of the tongue or a colloquial phrase or something that just doesn't work quite right with the story, and then you're out of it. And that doesn't mean you can't get back in, but it definitely is noticeable. So
And I think a lot of that is why I'm starting to look more at character story and developing that a little bit more, because I think if you can set the stage and have the reader come along for who this person is and find something to connect with, then I think it's believable as you
yeah,
move through the story, because everything needs to stem from, would this character actually do that? I mean, the action can be crazy as all heck, as long as you've set the stage for this
yeah,
character has a history of this, or this is, would be triggered by this, and this would be doing, this is why
yeah,
this would be working. I think that if you have a character kind of moving along this A path, and then you send him off over to C, you're like, well, where'd that come from?
yeah, yeah,
That
yeah,
the second line is where they go all the time. You'll be like, oh, I was sort of expecting that.
yeah, yeah. So do you get to a point when you're writing a series, because this is your second series, the first one was also 3 books, so I would imagine by the time you get to book 3, there are aspects that maybe you don't remember from book 1. Maybe it's just me. But do you have to keep like a character Bible or anything like that to keep yourself like, okay, this happened, or this person has said this, or this backstory was established, or
Yeah, I definitely have like and each book has its own notebook where I keep all my notes, and I'll have, changes that I want to make, things like that. A lot of times I don't go so much as eye color, hair color, that type of thing.
yeah, yeah,
But I will go through the previous book before I start writing, and search to make sure that I've got certain aspects correct before I go forward.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I've always tried to read the previous book before I start, so that I can keep the tone going, because it's really hard
yeah,
to pick up a
yeah,
third book, right? If you haven't read the second or first book for a couple of years, so, or a
yes,
year, whatever.
yeah,
So yeah, I always read the book right before I start the next project. So I start the tone correct.
yeah. Well, and that's, yeah, I hadn't even thought about that, but that's something too, is that there is a tone for each, and typically for different series have different tones, and even if it's the same writer,
Oh
like you
yeah.
talked about Deadly Pines and Hidden Pieces being much more gritty,
Yeah.
so I would imagine that shows up in a lot of different ways. And
Yeah. Just the fact he's a man, it's just, he
yeah,
thinks
yeah.
differently. He talks differently.
Was that, how did you, I've always wondered about that, because I am unimaginative, I guess. I don't know how if I could do that and
Sure.
be convincing. I suppose people do it all the time, but like write, a character that isn't like them in some way or another. But was
Yeah.
that something that you had to kind of consciously sort of observe people, or did you just kind of go with it? And
I just kind of went with it. Like I said, I had kind of a great group to pull from to a
yeah,
large degree.
yeah,
I also think sometimes on an emotional level, just kind of as on a personal note, I kind of understand. I'm more stoic in some ways.
yeah,
So I kind of related a little bit more to that a little bit. So
yeah, yeah,
it didn't feel like a far reach. I think the one area that I had help with through an editor was, men don't ramble on like not to say we ramble. That's not the word. That's not quite the word
I
I'm
feel
looking
called
for.
out. No, I'm kidding.
I'm not saying we ramble, but I mean,
Yeah,
You were emotional. We think things through. We have a conversation where a lot of times men are just like, hey, this is just kind of the way it is, And so my editor was like, yeah, he's not going to go through a whole, conversation about this. It's going to be.
Yeah.
And so as I kind of went through with her ideas and her notes, I was like, she's right. And I'm cutting. So I'm doing a lot of cutting. And I think that helped make him more believable in the end.
Yeah.
So.
What's your experience? Like, how do you handle this? Just like super, super silly side note, but how do you handle when you get edits back? Like, do you dive in right away, or do you like look at them and be grumpy for a while and then bring them back out?
Depends on the edits. I've done, this is my 5th book, it's hard to believe this is book 5. And, I think I was more thrown off by edits in the beginning.
Yeah.
Now I welcome them. I mean, as an author, I always want to get better. That is, for me, it's improving my craft all the time. But there are some people that are there's a little bit of a sharp edge on those edits sometimes,
Yes.
And I always give myself a day, because usually I'll read through them and I'll decide whether I agree or not. Sometimes I have a gut reaction. I'll be like, well, why did you even say you like this book? Or you've just decimated it with edits. Did you actually like this book? But usually by day 2, I can go in and I can see what they're trying to say. And really, I had a great editor once tell me that, okay, I get you're telling me that this is what you meant, but it's not on the page. So you need to get it on the page. And once that's there, then, we can decide whether it works or not. And that was great advice. So I've stopped defending, I don't defend my whatever. It is what it is. That's what you've chosen to say about the work. And then I will decide whether I can improve on it based on the editorial note. And usually I can. It's usually spot on, and I just couldn't see it. It just takes me a day. I'm human. I respond sometimes, like, what?
I think that's just human nature a lot of times, because I also love to be edited. I can't tell you what a relief it is to send something off and say, I know this isn't working, but I cannot even see how to fix it, and then get it back and go, oh yeah, of course. But it doesn't matter how wonderful and helpful the edits are. There's always that visceral reaction at the very beginning that's like, what do you mean you don't like that?
Yeah.
It was the most brilliant thing ever. But I have learned so much from being edited. I love being edited, but I don't always love it, if that makes sense.
But it is how you get better as a writer. I mean,
for sure.
You always want to be searching for that editor. I mean, a good editor really makes or breaks you.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, there's a, and I think the interesting thing is that they often can help us see like quirks or flaws in our writing that we would never have seen. But then once they tell us, then there are times now where I can go back and say, oh, I'm doing that again, or I'm doing that again. But I wouldn't have seen it at the beginning unless somebody had said, hey, you need to watch out for this. And
it becomes a blaring thing all of a sudden.
Yeah, exactly.
How did I not see that?
Okay, I didn't see that. What when you take an idea, you said you pants it, and I know that. So what does it look like when you like grab onto something that's working and you're going? How does it look for you at that point on? Like, I know that a lot of times people who, and for those of you who are watching who are hearing us say pantsing, I think most people who are, watch authors being interviewed have probably heard this before. But if you haven't, the idea is that a plotter is somebody who it does exactly what the word sounds like, where they plot out ahead of time, they outline, they plan, they might have like sticky note boards or stuff up on the wall, and they kind of have everything figured out ahead of time, and then they go ahead and write it. And a pantser is somebody who tends to get an idea in their head and just writes. And I think it's fair to say that nobody is like 100% all one way or the other, but people definitely tend to lean one way or the other. but you still, the editing process, I think sometimes looks different for plotters and pantsers. Like plotters might have worked some of the kinks out ahead of time. And then, a pantser might have to go back and work things out. How does that look for you usually when you're going through your process and you've like got an idea and you're going? Do you go all the way through the idea and get all the way to the end and then come back and edit? Or is there some back and forth that happens?
Yeah, no, I edit all the way through. So when I start a writing day, I read the first few chapters. That takes me a good hour usually to kind of get through what I wrote the day before. No, I'm really big on trying not to put myself into a corner, because nothing would be worse than to get to page 230 and go, oh Lord, none of this is working. But what I do find as I edit, even after as I edit and I move forward and edit and move forward, there are going to be ideas that are coming. And I just put notes. So I work in Word. I love Word. And I just go back and I just put a comment that says, make sure to add this, make sure to add that. So the next time I go through, I don't go all the way back at that point if I'm further along. But if something comes up, or, I'll like, oh, this is a new idea. Okay, I need to go plant that seed somewhere in here. This red herring needs to be planted in this section. And then I'll catch that on the way through. So, but I don't, because I go back and edit, I don't usually paint myself into a corner too often.
Yeah. So you are essentially, it's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, all along,
all the way through.
Yeah. I find myself doing that too, where I will like read something from the previous session.
Yeah.
Because it's almost like you have to draw yourself back into the flow of it. And remember what you were doing.
Well, I don't know about you, but I can't hardly remember what I did yesterday sometimes. And so I need that.
No, I can't remember what I did 5 minutes ago.
Sometimes it's getting worse the older we get, I think.
I don't think mine's age related, so I don't think I can blame it on that.
No.
But and then once you're all done, is there do you have beta readers read it, or do you go back and read the whole thing all the way through?
I read it all the way through before I subject it onto a beta reader. I like to be I like it to look like it's been through 3 or 4 edits before I let other people read. But I actually have a critique group, people, not as a group, but people that I trust, and that we do swaps all the time. I read their books when they're in draft and we throw it back and forth. And then I do have a couple of beta readers that I use. I always put them in my books, women I used to work with, big mystery readers. And so I love to see their take. They always have something usually that they can offer, at the end. And then it goes off to my agent or to my editor at that point. So, and then it'll get changed again. But, of course. I've done it as best as I can.
Yeah. No, I think that's interesting. It's always interesting to me to talk to pre-published writers and who are, I think nervous about, I think it's really just comes down to being nervous about something that feels like it's yours and you're going to hand it off and then it's going to not be yours or something. And I completely understand that emotion, but I think people don't really realize until you're into it that there is no such thing as a book that isn't a group project.
Right. It's a village every single time. I've met some writers that are like, I will not change this, I will not change that, or I don't want people to read this about me. I've always known I wanted to be a traditionally published author, and it's been a dream of mine since I was in my 20s. So I was always prepared to do what was necessary to get better, for the book to be at the top of its game. And so you have to kind of get over that and just be willing to be, edited and criticized to, constructively. And you have to be willing to start over. And I think, and tear it apart and rebuild it if you need to. That's what gets you better. And if you want to be published or do whatever, and you want to maintain that control, that's totally cool. But it just depends what your path you're going to go.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
if you want traditional, give it up.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I would argue actually it's been interesting because we have people coming into the store to sell a work of all, traditionally published hybrid or whatever. And what I find is the people that are most successful are the people that recognize that village status, sort of regardless of how your book is going to end up making it out into the world. If there's a recognition that I'm going to self-publish, but I'm going to hire an editor and I'm going to hire a cover designer and I'm going to take edits seriously and stuff. And those are those people self-publishing that are doing a fabulous job self-publishing and are putting these amazing stories out into the world. So I think it doesn't matter so much how you end up publishing as whether or not you're willing to participate in that group process of making a book.
I would agree with that. Yes.
Yeah.
Because and I wasn't saying anything against
No, I know you weren't.
Yeah. But definitely it's you just have to be willing to get better, and no, you're not perfect. I mean, nobody, I don't know any author. I'm sure there's some authors out there in the world that can do one pass and get it done, but
I don't know. I'd be real surprised.
I'd be surprised.
So tell us a little bit more for those who haven't had a chance to read them yet. Derailed, Denied, and Deceived.
Yes.
Your first series came at the mystery in a little bit different way. She's a PI. Does she come out of the legal field? I can't remember.
No, she worked for her father and she inherited her dad's PI agency.
Okay.
She's a single mom. She has a deaf daughter that she co-parents with her ex-husband, Jeff, and she lives next door to his mother. So her ex-mother-in-law. And that is kind of the setting, set in Portland. And in Derailed, she's taking on her very first case after her father has died. And it's a client who knew her father. And we work all the way through until the end when she becomes a very legit and established PI. So the trilogy.
So if you're interested in that kind of mystery, we do have copies of that whole series in the store as well. So you can come and pick up all 5. They're all signed.
Grafton, people who love Sue Grafton or Sarah Paretsky, I think they would really enjoy this,
Yes. Yeah. And if you come, I'm going to ask you more about what's coming next, but I have to put this plug in that Mary came to the bookstore and signed books today and brought cookies. So if you come in the next few days and pick up a book, you get a cookie.
And I tried them tonight
pretty.
because, I have to try them every time they are made. And they are exceptionally good this time.
Yes. No, they were good last time too. So we're super excited about today and Deadly Tides and all of that good stuff, but we're also super excited because you have another book coming out next summer. Can you talk about that one a little bit?
Yeah, that is my first standalone and my first domestic suspense. It's called Don't Ask, Don't Follow. It's about 2 sisters, and it actually, what's fun about it is it's set in a law firm. And I worked 18 years in a law firm. So it was like the first book I wrote that I get to actually draw from.
Oh, fun.
Experience. So that was really fun. It's a Portland law firm. But the 2 sisters are very different. One is a journalist, one's a paralegal, and the paralegal works in her father's firm. And it starts out at Christmas, and the journalist's sister, Lindsay, is supposed to come to the Christmas party, and she's a no-show. And Beth, my main character, heads back to her office and sees Lindsay running out the door. And so she follows and she can't catch up with her. And when she comes back, she finds her boss, Beth's boss, has been murdered. So, and when she goes back to her office, she finds a note on her desk or on her text that says, "Don't ask, don't follow," from Lindsay. So, of course, she's going to have to figure out how Lindsay is involved in her boss's murder, because suddenly the police are looking at Beth and then all of a sudden they're looking at Lindsay. So, yeah.
So what is the, I can infer a little bit from what you're talking about as far as what the plot is, but what's the sort of technical definition of domestic suspense?
Family oriented.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. Anything to do with family. It can be husband, wife, or sisters. And yes, as long as it's family related. It's a domestic suspense novel.
Okay. I'm learning a new term. And is that one, like, how did the idea come for that one? Where did that, see, these are questions I'm probably gonna ask you again in 6 months, but that's okay. We'll do them this time too.
I really like the idea of two sisters, being very different. Lindsay is older. That's the little sister. But Lindsay's kind of rogue. She's radical a little bit, and Beth's real, centered. And so I like that idea of having these two very different sisters, and then all of a sudden something that it's going to threaten to split them down the middle, and not only them, but their family. So as Beth kind of gets into the investigation, that's where that idea came through. It's like, oh, what if?
Yeah.
There's secrets coming out of the woodwork that's going to explode everything she thinks her life is. And so that's kind of how that idea came.
Yay. Oh, that's exciting. See, this is why book selling is such a fun job, is there's like constant dopamine, because you're like, oh, and there's a new book coming. Oh, and then there's another new one coming.
So true. It's that way as an author too. All of my friends are always writing books, or there's new things coming out.
Yeah.
It was fun to read all the new stuff.
Yeah.
So
what are you hoping for people? Like, when you send a book out of the world like Deadly Tides or Hidden Pieces, is there anything that you kind of hope people will get out of it? Is kind of crass, but it just like, what do you imagine like the ideal reader experience when you imagine somebody reading these?
Well, obviously, I just want people to enjoy the book. I mean, that to me is, I just want them to lose themselves in a world that I've helped create, and to just, enjoy the characters and the story. I tend to always have a theme in the book, or something that my characters are struggling with. I try to deal with real life events, grief and loss. That's something I've had a lot in my own life. So I put a lot of it in my books. I like my characters seem to be dealing with grief, probably because I deal with it. I think, so it's a mirror a lot of times. And I've always said, if even one person can see themselves in that or find healing at the end, that's far exceeded anything I could have hoped for. But at the end of the day, it's always about entertainment. I am a fiction murder mystery, so but I still want people to relate to those characters and maybe find something in them. I think that's the ultimate experience. So
because I know that with the first one, especially the main characters just kind of going through some pretty heavy stuff and
living up to her father's expectations as he dies suddenly. Losing her mom. But, I still try to, I try not to bury my characters in it too much, except for Jax. When you meet him at Hidden Pieces, I never like to sugarcoat that he's at the lowest point at that very beginning. But, he can only go up from there, and he does. So he doesn't stay there.
Well, I think that I'm going off tangent. This might end badly. This is not a planned question or comment, but what you said just kind of triggered this thought of that. I mean, working in a bookstore, I think a lot about how we like to categorize books. And, these books would be considered genre fiction. They're not literary fiction, but I watch like literary fiction being held up as kind of up here, and then you have like fantasy and romance and mystery and stuff is not quite as intellectual
cozy mysteries even
exactly. And I observe that hierarchy I think humans just do that because it occurs in almost everything that you can think of. But what I think is especially interesting about books and writing is that they're things that are fun and meant to be entertainment can also deal with things that are really hard, and in some ways having that outlet in a way that's not, this book is about this hard thing, but more, this book is about this fun thing. but also this sort of processing back here is going on at the same time as I'm reading this fun story. In some ways, I think that almost is equally as valuable, or sometimes even more so, for people than a literary fiction that is trying to attack that topic head on. Because sometimes when you're processing through grief or other hard things, you don't want to read a book about that,
Right.
but a book about this guy solving a mystery who also happens to be going through these things in his life.
Yeah. And when you think of all, like even in movies, you watch a comedy, but yet there's so many poignant moments in it of loss or, grief or growth or whatever. And, but, just as a side note, this is really weird, but I was on a plane recently coming back from Europe, and I got to watch Guardians of the Galaxy #3, right?
Yeah.
Which is just a wild, I just love Marvel anyway. So, but there was a part in this loss of a relationship, like that was actually really poignant in the movie. And here's this crazy movie, but
it's absolutely nuts, but
but it speaks to a level of a relationship lost, right? And I think you're right. You can be entertained and yet still be kind of moved into a place of, and it's when you can connect with the characters really, and that you're moving through the arc with them, that you can also see that in yourself. And every writer, whether it's fantasy, romance, whatever, science fiction, there's always a little piece of that author in that book, and they're working on something, because it's a reflection on some level.
No, and not dissing on literary fiction at all either, because I think it does important things too. But sometimes I feel like it's more of, we're going to deal with this terrible thing in this book, and I'm like, I don't want to read about that, but I'll read a genre fiction that's maybe dealing with that same kind of thing, but on a little bit different level, and sometimes get more out of it in a way. Absolutely. Because I didn't have to deal with it face on. I dealt with it sort of sideways. And so
I think you're right.
But anyway, I don't know. It's just kind of the power of a book, and the power of, that shared story to work through shared experiences.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes we're drawn to a book that we may not even realize that we need to read, just you don't even know what the lesson will be in it, or what it's going to feed for you. So it's cool. The beauty. That's
probably a profound note to wrap up on. But are you appearing in person anywhere that people could come and see you?
Yeah, so I am going to be at the Portland Book Festival.
Oh, yay.
At the Willamette Writers table. I'm going to be there from 1, well, I'll be around, but I have a book signing from 1 to 1:30. So if somebody comes to you and buys a book and wants it signed, and just bring them with them down to the festival, I'll be happy to sign a book down there. Or whatever, talk story or whatever.
What day of the week is that?
That's a Saturday.
Okay.
And then
that's not this Saturday, but next Saturday?
I'm sorry, Saturday. I should give you a date here.
That's okay.
November 4th.
Okay. Yeah. So it's not this next weekend, but the weekend after.
Yes.
Okay.
And then that's the only real live one where people can come visit. I will be on Coin Extra at 8:00 on Monday the 6th. So I'll be excited to give you a shout out.
Thank you. That's exciting though.
That will be fun.
Oh, and I forgot to mention this earlier. So can you please quickly say, because we were very excited for Mary, because Hidden Pieces got recognized several different ways. And can you share the different things that it got recognized for?
Yeah, so the IPPY Award is the Independent Publishing Award, and it received a silver medal for Best Mystery and Suspense. I was a Silver Falchion finalist for Best Detective Novel, and I'm on the long list at the moment, because it's kind of a long process, for the Chanticleer Awards for The Clue, which is Best Suspense Novel.
Yay!
Yeah.
So the Hidden Pieces that we have in the store have a cool fancy sticker on them, which is very exciting.
Pretty silver surface.
Yeah. So, okay, so I will link to that Portland Book Festival website for everybody in the description of the video after we're done here, so that you can go and find out exact details if you want to stop by and see Mary in person. Trying to think all the good stuff that's coming up at the store. We will have next Tuesday, our Vintage Books Live event is a special Halloween event because we happen to be falling on Halloween night. And I said, we should do something fun. So we have 3 local poets, Armin Tolentino, who's the Clark County Poet Laureate, and William Erickson and Abby Braithwaite are going to hang out with me and talk spooky poetry, and we're going to try our hand at writing spooky poetry and basically just have a fun time together. So I hope that you will all join us for that, because I think it's going to be good fun. And then we haven't posted these. Oh, that's not true. Actually, I think I did a post a few days ago on our social media about our book clubs for next month. Just so you all can I'm looking down at my phone so I can grab the information, but so you all can grab your books and have time to read them before. The Cozy Mystery Book Club is reading Dairy Quite Contrary, which has a very cute little dog on the front cover, by Amy Lillard. They changed the time to be a little bit later, hopefully helping more people be able to come. It's Tuesday, November 14th at 4. And our sci-fi fantasy choice for this month is Soul Jar, which was published by our friends at Forest Avenue Press in Portland. Yeah, edited by Annie Carl, who is a bookseller in Washington State. We're actually going to do this one virtually this time because it just wasn't working out for folks that had been attending to come this month, just because we're kind of creeping up on the holiday season. So we're going to do it online Wednesday, November 18th at 7. And that's going to be something that you'll need to ping me for the Zoom link, because we want everybody to be able to interact and talk and stuff. So we'll do that via Zoom. So you can just email books@vintage-books.com and we will send you the Zoom link for that. So lots of things coming up. And then we have a full slate of Vintage Books Live guests in November. So be sure to check out the website for that. And thank you so much for joining us and coming and signing books today and leaving cookies and all that good stuff.
Thanks for having me. This is fun.
We are very excited for you. And we hope that people buy lots and lots of copies.
Yes, I will do my best to send them your way.
All righty. Thank you. Thank you, everybody who got the chance to watch tonight and who is watching later on YouTube. We will talk to you later.
Thanks.
Good night.